Kairi, welcome back to my channel, Made Between the Pages. My name is Taylor, and today we're going to talk about all of the series that I'm not going to be continuing going forward in 2024. Now, I did the math for myself, and I have 57 unfinished series on my Goodreads, not including manga. And that's just ridiculous. Like, I can't... It really bothers me that I let it get to this point. I'd mentioned in my 2024 goals video that I developed this nasty habit of starting a series and then not following through with it, even if I love it. And this is the result of that. I've gone through that whole list though, and I've decided that there are 29 series that I'm going to continue with and 28 that I'm just going to put to the side and just leave it where it is. So today we're going to go over those 28. These might not even be series that you're aware that I started, because keep in mind this is from my Goodreads from when I started, documenting books on there, which is back before I was really into BookTube. So some of these series might be a surprise that I even started them. But without further ado, let's just get started. Quick disclaimer for this video. There's a point where it just goes out of focus. My camera lost the plot, couldn't find my face. It's not horrible to look at, but it's annoying. So I was gonna re-record this video for you guys. But then, if you can't hear from this voiceover, my voice is shot. I got a cold and tonsillitis at the same time in the first week of January. I am on the mend, but my voice can't handle like a long sit-down video right now. So you guys are just gonna get this video as it is, because I would like to get the content out to you guys. So if you like to listen to, YouTube while you're like doing chores and stuff, this would be the video to do that too. Sorry guys, promise it'll be better in the next one. So the first one is going to be The Raven Cycle. Listen, I know that people love the Raven Boys. I know that it's a comfort series for a lot of people. And I heard from a lot of people also that it was all vibes, no plot kind of thing for the first book. So I went in expecting that. But when they say no, all vibes, no plot, like they really mean that. Nothing happens in the book, and then finally at the end this antagonist appears out of nowhere and I'm supposed to care. Like I feel like in the very end Stiefvater was like, I don't have any kind of conflict going on here, let me just drum one up out of nowhere to make like a finale scene. I don't get it. I don't get that series at all. I'm happy for you if it works for you, but absolutely not for me. So that's not happening. The second is The Handmaid's Tale. So this was a standalone for a very long time, and then Atwood released The Testaments, I think is the name of like the sequel to it. And at first I did want to read it, but the longer I kind of sat on it, I realized I'm happy just reading The Handmaid's Tale as its own thing. It's a very impactful book that had a lot to say, and I'm really glad that I've read it, but I don't really feel the need to add on to it, and I've heard really mixed reviews about The Testaments anyway, so I think I'm just gonna leave it at a standalone in my world. Next is the Truly Devious series. This was a YA thriller series. I really got into thrillers for a while there, and I really did like the first book, but this was kind of my fault. I went into it thinking that it was gonna be standalone, and it wasn't, so it ended on a cliffhanger. And I wasn't invested enough in the mystery itself to continue on. I think it's a trilogy, or quartet. I think it's a trilogy. And I didn't care enough to continue. It's kind of got a dark academia feel to it, and I'm just not a dark academia girly. I've accepted that about myself. It's just not an aesthetic that I can really sink my teeth into. So while the setting was interesting, it's like this old manor, like prep school kind of thing. And someone gets murdered and they're trying to figure out who it was. I didn't care enough. If it had been wrapped up in that first book, I think it would have been a solid 3-star read, but yeah, I'm not interested in reading the next two. This next one might be a little controversial, but that is the Poppy War trilogy. I read the first book, Poppy War, before it really took off, so basically I was part of the cool crowd. No, I just remember hearing about, like, whispers about it, and I went home to the States for a trip, back earlier in my channel, and I ran to the store to get this book. I remember I was so excited for it. And so I didn't have any super clear expectations going into it. No one was really talking about how the first half of the book and the second half of the book are very different things, and that I think it was a purposeful thing by Kwong. to do that, but I was not prepared for it. So I went in expecting like a YA school story. And if you've read even the first book, you know that that's not what that is about. But it felt very jarring for me, and I also couldn't connect to the magic system at all. It just felt very scattered. I just remember really not being able to sink my teeth into the world, and it didn't work for me. It didn't work for me in a lot of ways. So I just have no desire to finish the series. I've heard that the ending, it really seems to split people. They either love it or they hate it. I still haven't been spoiled for it because I was kind of thinking maybe I'll get back to it at some point. But with all of the books that I want to read, it's time that I just admit to myself that I'm not going to finish the series. Next is The Legacy of Orisha. The first one was Blood and Bone. What was it called? I'll put the title on the screen here. I can see it in my head. This book was just mid. It was completely mid for me. I know some people really hated it. I don't think that it was awful because I do remember enjoying myself there. But I also read this before I was as critical as I am online. I was a lot more careful, and I was a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? Giving's not the right word. Forgiving. There we go. I was a lot more forgiving in my reviews at that time. And I think I was afraid to go against the grain and say I didn't like something that everyone was praising, to be honest. So I think I was a lot nicer in my review. I think I ended up giving this like a 4-star, but when I think back on it, it really didn't deserve that 4-star. Like, everything about it was just mid, honestly. And I did plan on continuing on in the series to see if it would increase initially, but then the second book came out and everyone hated that book. Absolutely hated it and said that the quality just took a nosedive. So after hearing basically every single review say that, I was like, yeah, I'm just not gonna continue with this. So we're gonna write off the series as well. See, now when I made this list, I wrote the series names, and I don't know why I didn't write the name of at least the first book next to it, because I know damn well that I don't know all of the names, all of these series names. The Unseen World. What series is that? Why did I do this to myself? Let me Google this. Okay. It's the Unkindness of Magician series. So this was, again, supposed to be a standalone, and I didn't like this book as much as I wanted to. There were elements of it that I thought were interesting, but something about it just, I don't know, it didn't work for me. I think I ended up giving it like a 2.5. It's about this world of like warring houses of magicians, and they have a competition every so many years to see who's going to be like the top house, I think. It is the story, and we follow our main character who was wronged by this society, very much so, and she enters into this competition, and it's very vicious. Like, it's not like, oopsie, we failed the competition. It's like people die. It's, quite brutal. And I did like some of the things done here, but yeah, like I said, some things just didn't work for me. And I was just going to treat it as a standalone, but then I guess it was popular enough that A Sleight of Shadows, which is the second book now in this duology, came out, I think, last year, and I'm not interested. So just kind of like The Handmaid's Tale, this is going to stay a standalone in my brain, and I'm just going to leave it at that. Number 7 might be a little controversial, and that is the series of Unfortunate Events. I kind of just missed the boat with this one. I did not read it when I was the right age for it, and while I do think middle grade can be extremely enjoyable at my big age of 31, I really do think you can have a great time with it. Like Mari and the Night Brothers, I love that series. I love Nevermore. I really like The House of Chicken Legs and The Girl Who Speaks Bear. So I do think that there are a lot of middle grade series that I can still very much enjoy as long as I'm in the right mood. But when I first started my channel, I wanted to read kind of those older books that I didn't get a chance to read. And I think I read the first like 3 or 4. They're at my library here. And I mean, they were okay, but I wasn't getting the kind of whimsy and joy that I want to get from a middle grade read. When I was reading them, I was just kind of going through the motions reading them. So I think I just kind of missed my chance to enjoy the series. So I'm just going to put it to the side. I read the first couple and they were all right. So yeah, I'm just going to leave it there. This next one though, I actively did not like this book, and that was the Charlotte Holmes series. It's a gender-swapped version of Sherlock Holmes. And so, Holmes is a girl. And I hated this book quite a bit. The dynamic between Watson and Holmes is a lot more, in my interpretation anyway, even than it was presented in this book. So basically, Holmes is just an asshole 24/7 to Watson, and Watson just apologizes 24/7. Like, that is the whole book, and that's not the dynamic between the two. Like, Holmes is a righteous asshole, don't get me wrong, and I'm glad that they kind of kept that aspect of his personality in the Sherlock Holmes series, but I did not like how they had Watson have no spine. Like, he's one of the only people that can give it back to Holmes and, kind of put him in his place sometimes, and that was completely missing from the dynamic in this book, and so it just felt like, yeah, I was just very annoyed, and that dynamic is key to the story. I also really didn't care about the mystery. I could kind of guess it before it was revealed. I actively did not enjoy this book. So I think it's like a quartet or something like that. I'm not picking up any of the others in the series, honestly. And I think I gave away my first book, so A Study in Charlotte. I think I gave that away. So yeah, I checked out from that a long time ago, I think. Next is the Queen's Thief series, the first book being The Thief. I read this ages ago, and I expected to love it. It felt like it was trying to be this kind of Indiana Jones, like Tomb Raider. I love Tomb Raider, like vibes of going to find older artifacts. You have a thief that gets roped into helping this other guy find the artifacts. I think it's for the Queen. It was so long ago when I read this, but it seemed like a plot that I would really enjoy, but I didn't care. I was just I didn't hate it and I didn't love it. I was just completely apathetic to the story. And I think it was actually Jimmy on the most recent Page Chewing episode where he said the last thing that you want to feel when you're reading is apathy. Like, that's the only thing you really don't want to feel. And that really struck me. And that's how I feel about this book. So I'm just not going to continue with the series because I honestly forgot that it existed before I made this list. Number 10, another middle grade that I think I just missed the timing for is Percy Jackson. Look, y'all, I'm sorry. Again, I read the first 2 or 3 books because I wanted to know. I wanted to get it. And it was okay. I wasn't getting the whimsy. I wasn't getting the correct vibes from it. So I'm really happy that these work for so many people and bring the nostalgia to so many people, but it's just not something that gripped me, which is weird because I love mythology. I love Greek mythology. I love folklore stories. So you would think this would really be in my wheelhouse, but it just never really stuck for me. So, yeah, I think I'm just gonna, maybe I'll watch the adaptation. I think there's one coming out. Am I making that up? I feel like there's an adaptation coming out, so I might watch that, but it's just not a series that I feel like I need to finish. Next, we have King of Scars, which is the second trilogy, like the sequel trilogy to the Shadow and Bone series, I think. Yes. So we have the Shadow and Bone trilogy, and then we have the Six of Crows duology, and then the King of Scars trilogy as well. And I love Six of Crows. I've talked about this before. I have a really weird relationship with Leigh Bardugo because Six of Crows duology is I love it so much. It's a comfort read for me. I don't do rereads often, but I've reread those books I think like 3 or 4 times. I think it is lightning in a bottle, which is so good. I also love her Language of Thorns short story collection from the Grishaverse. I think it's extremely underrated. It's a beautiful, it has beautiful artwork in it as well. It's just a beautiful little book. Love it. But Shadow and Bone trilogy, hated it. Did not like that at all. But I did like Nikolai. He was like the only character that I really enjoyed. So when I heard that he was getting a trilogy, I was like, well, maybe this will be another hit for me in the way that Six of Crows was not. I didn't like it at all. We have a lot of characters. Oh, what's that girl's name? Again, editing Taylor will put it on the screen. She's a lot of like a fan favorite, mean girl turned, like beloved character, kind of like Nesta. But I don't like her. Her redemption arc wasn't believable for me. I wasn't about it. So I have no desire to continue with this series. Leigh Bardugo and I are just going to continue to have a tumultuous relationship. I'm not saying that I'll never read her again or anything like that, but it's really going to have to strike me. Because even for, what's that other series? Hellbent is the second one. I can't remember the first one. But those are also the dark academia vibes that I said I'm not really into. So I'm not writing off Leigh Bardugo, but it could be that the Six of Crows duology was just like a lightning in the bottle moment for her and it's just going to remain that way. I don't know. Okay, next we have The Alchemical Journeys by Shauna McGuire. That's Middle Game being the first one. I love the Wayward Children series, okay, by Shauna McGuire. I think her writing is beautiful. I also adore Under the Drowning Deep under her other pen name, Mira Grant. I think her writing is magical, whimsical, beautiful. But Middle Game, talk about all vibes, no plot. I read that entire book. I still couldn't tell you what happened. I have no idea. There's only a couple books that bring that out of me. That one and IQ 84 by Murakami. Read the whole thing, couldn't tell you a synopsis. No idea what happened. It's about two twins, Roger and Dodger, who were made through like alchemical experiments. That's not the word I wanted. Alchemical experiments. And the villain in this story is just such a mustache twirly villain who's just like, I'm gonna take over the world. Nothing about this book worked for me. I was like, what the hell am I reading? I had to force myself to finish it. So maybe that's also why I kind of feel a little bitter against it, because I forced myself to finish it. I've talked about this before. Like, I needed to get better at DNFing at this point in my life. I have gotten better since, but yeah, nope. McGuire, I will read other things by her, and I definitely plan to catch up on the Wayward Children series. I think I'm like 2 books behind at this point, but this series is not. It's not happening. Serpent and Dove. This is a YA romance that it was one of those things that kind of just caught on online. I'm not sure what the originating, trigger factor was for it to really take off above other books, but everyone was screaming about this book. It's a hate to love fantasy romance between a witch and a witch hunter, which sounded interesting to me. I do like fantasy romance. I don't read it as much as I kind of wish I did. So I was excited to get to this one, but it was completely mid. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. There were some interesting aspects to it, but I just don't care enough to continue. And I heard that the second one, I think it's like Blood and Honey or whatever, I heard that that's not good. So apparently I'm not missing much. The Gilded Wolves. This one was partially because of marketing, I think, because it was marketed as the next Six of Crows. Like, that's all everyone comped it to. And I've already talked about how much I love Six of Crows. So I went into this, I think, with specific expectations because of how much it was comped to that series. So I think part of my experience with this read was because I went in with those expectations. But even outside of that, it's a heist. It's a bunch of like found, people brought together, found family vibes. But they're supposed to be like solving all these mysteries, and it's like the mysteries were so easy. Like, if I can solve them in 2 seconds, it's really hard for me to believe that these super intelligent heist completing, people who are supposed to be the best in their field can't do it. I was just staring at the answer on the page like, come on now. So that really took me out of the experience of the story, and it didn't work. It didn't click with me. I don't think this is a bad book per se, but it just didn't click with me at all. The Darkest Minds. I read this during my retro reads challenge that I did at the very beginning of my channel, where I wanted to read all of the like booktube darlings. But something I didn't take into account, I think, enough when I started that challenge way back when was that a lot of the books are YA, because a lot of the booktube darlings from way back when were people who were reading YA because that was their age group. So those are the ones that got talked about the most. And I had kind of already aged out of that section of books. Not that I can't enjoy YA, I still can. But I think I have to go into a YA knowing, being in the mood for those kinds of tropes. And I just wasn't. And I found that I was judging a lot of the series harshly and not having a good time reading them because I was going in with the wrong vibes, the wrong expectations. So The Darkest Minds was one of those series that I read at that time. And it was so, guys, y'all, it's so not good. Like, nothing about the world building makes sense. I went on a rant about this. I remember this. It's not just suspending disbelief. Like, you just have to not care about world building, because there's supposed to be these essentially concentration camps where these kids with powers are kept under control. But the way that these camps and the security is set up, nothing about it would work in this world. I also couldn't stand the main character. She is insufferable, and we're reading from her perspective, so that makes it harder. There are some books where I'm like, okay, I get the hype, but I've just aged out of it. This series, though, I don't get it. I don't think it was well designed. I don't think it was well planned out. It was not good. Next is the Between Earth and Sky series, the first one being Black Sun. Listen, when I read the prologue of this book, I got 5-star vibes. I thought it was going to be a new all-time favorite. Unfortunately, though, there are like 3 POVs in this book, and I didn't care about 2 of them at all. There was only 1 POV that caught my attention, and so that made 2/3 of the book just not enjoyable for me. I also felt like the world building was there, but it was too light for me to really, sink into. I talk about that skimming feeling on my channel all the time. I felt like I was just skimming over this world. Unfortunately, this one just didn't work out for me, which is a shame because it's like a pre-colonial, I think South American. It's been ages since I read this, but I believe pre-colonial South American setting. And it was so interesting. I hadn't read anything like it before, and I just wanted more of that. So I didn't dislike this book. I think it ended up being okay. I think I gave it like a 3-star or something like that. But I don't care enough to continue. That first book is gorgeous, though. I'm really surprised that I didn't buy it before reading it because it's so damn pretty. Next we have A Song of Wraiths and Ruin. This was another one that really got on the hype train on BookTube for a while there. I don't think this is a bad book by any means. It just didn't strike me in any way to kind of stand out. So it just kind of disappeared into the background of like my reading life after I finished it, which means that I don't really care to see what happens next. So it's not a bad book at all, but just meh. I'm just gonna let it slowly fade off into the distance. This next one is the Collector series. The first book is The Butterfly Garden, which is a thriller, and it was good. It was fun for what it was, and I liked a lot of the themes that it dealt with, but very similar to The Darkest Minds, you really have to suspend disbelief. You just have to not have belief in the world as it is for this plot to really work. And like I said, it was fun for what it was, but I feel like it would be better as a standalone, honestly. It's about this serial killer guy who kidnaps women and keeps them as his butterflies and makes like a collection of keeping these women imprisoned. So it's an interesting concept, but like I said, I don't think it was developed enough to really, for me to want to read a series about it. But it was a good, standalone thriller in my mind. So I'm just going to leave it at that. The next one was a big disappointment for me because I thought I was going to love it, and that's the Legend of the Mercenary King series, the first one being The Kingdom of Liars. This caught my attention right away from the blurb. It's got this like moon that slowly pieces break from the moon and fall down to Earth, and then within those pieces or through those pieces you can get a prophecy. So obviously a piece of the moon breaking off is a huge event, or should be a huge event in this world, and we follow a main character whose father was supposedly the king killer, the person who killed the previous king, so he's shunned by everyone, and he's a mercenary, as you can tell in the title, and the main character was just insufferable. I could not stand reading from his perspective. I know that in order to show like a character arc of growth, you have to start somewhere to grow from. So I get that the character has flaws. Like I like a flawed character, but he was just a whiny little brat 24/7. I couldn't stand him. So reading from his perspective, I think ruined a lot of the story for me. If you don't have such a visceral reaction to him, then, that POV might not bother you and it might be a much better experience for you, but I could not stand it. Also, I didn't like how important, like, this moon thing was projected to be in the synopsis, because it was barely there in the book, and that was something I was extremely interested in, was like the world that this was set in, and how having prophecies fall from the moon would have a huge effect on economies, even on different societies. Where the moon falls, I'm sure suddenly gets lots of power. Like I wanted to play with that idea a lot. I wanted to read about an author playing with that idea, but it was barely there. So couldn't stand the main POV and didn't have the world building that I wanted, so it was a disappointing read for me. So I just have no interest in continuing. These Violent Delights, I wanted to like this so much. I went into this really hoping to enjoy myself because it was getting amazing reviews from a lot of people that share my taste. But I could not bring myself to care. Every time I tried to read this book, I was thinking, what am I going to have for dinner? I'm going to do that. I'm going to clean. I'm going to do this. Like, I could not focus for the life of me on this book, and I ended up DNFing it at like 20%. I just gave in. This was the part of my life where I was starting to realize, like, DNFing is okay, and I don't need to force myself to finish, so I DNF'd this one, which means, like, I'm definitely not going to continue with the series. The next series is the Burning Kingdom series, the first one being the Jasmine Throne. Talk about a disappointment. Oh my god, I wanted to love this so much. A sapphic political backstabby story with nature magic that has a high cost. Sounds like everything I would love. Unfortunately, this was such a drag. I think I was buddy reading this. Yeah, I was buddy reading this with Sophia from Fantasy Book Addict, so I finished it because of that. But I was bored for large swaths of this story, unfortunately. There were moments that I still remember in my head, like these peak moments that I was very engaged, but they were few and far between, and the rest of the book just felt like a slog for me, honestly, which broke my heart. God, because the magic system is such a cool idea. I also love me some sapphics, but I couldn't root for them. There was nary a spark. Where chemistry? Where? Who? Who is she? We don't know her. It was just so dry. It was so dry. I know a lot of people who love this series, though, so I think that I'm very much in the minority with these opinions. This next one I was also just very mid about and don't care to continue, and that was Catfishing on Catnet. I guess I thought it was a standalone again, but I guess it's a series, like the Catnet series or something. It's a very unique story, not something that I would usually pick up at all, very outside my usual genre. It's a contemporary, not thriller, mystery maybe? And the way that the mystery was wrapped up was like, went from 0 to 100 real quick. Like, I was like, where did this come from? It didn't seem to have any foreshadowing that I could pick up on anyway that would make it a reasonable ending to the story. Well, I thought it was the ending, but I guess it's a series. But yeah, once the ending happened, I was like, well, all right, that was a thing that I read. And just moved on from it. So I learned that it was a series when I was making this list, and I was going through Goodreads just to see what was, listed as a series. And I was like, oh, this has a sequel? Don't care enough to read it. So yeah, it was all right. The Indian Lake Trilogy by Stephen Graham Jones. The first one being My Heart is a Chainsaw. I want to like Jones so badly. Like, every time I hear the premises of his books or he releases a new one, I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. Like, I want to pick that up. But everything that I pick up by him, I say this like I picked up a bunch of things. I've only picked up 2 books, The Only Good Indians and My Heart is a Chainsaw. But each of them didn't work for me in ways that I think might just be a part of his writing. The Only Good Indians ended up being a 3 or 3.5 star for me, and it's still, like, the motifs of that story still stuck in my head to this day. So I do think that he's very good at creating disturbing imagery and vibes, but something about his writing just doesn't seem to click well for me. And My Heart is a Chainsaw is another example of that. But I think another layer on top of that was this is very specific to people who love slashers, like that genre of movie. And I am not a horror movie girly, never have been, never will be. I don't mind human killers, so like slashers is a genre that I could probably watch. Ghosties I don't want anything to do with them. But human killers, bring it on. My toxic trait is that I think that I could kill the killer, so so somewhere in my brain I tell myself that it's okay. Anyway, that was a rant. But I'm not into slashers, and this entire book is basically dedicated to those who love slashers. It's got a lot of deep cuts, and it didn't bring me the joy that I think it would bring someone who's a fan of that genre. So I think that was like an added layer. And I do want to try at least one more book of his, because I don't know, there's something in me that feels like he and I could click somewhere. I just haven't found it. But yeah, My Heart is a Chainsaw was not it. The only part of this book that I really, really enjoyed was the ending, which kind of went away from the slasher vibes and went to like a larger theme, and I was like, ooh, I could dig this. But unfortunately, we haven't found where we meet yet, Stephen Graham Jones and I. One day maybe we will, but it won't be that series. We've got only 5 more to go. The next one is the Covenant of Steel series. This one also really disappointed me. I wanted to love this so much. The first book is The Pariah, and it has this morally gray character with a theme that I adore in my fantasy books, which is religion as like a power structure in society, not just as, an institution. And this book plays with that so much. There's also these Joan of Arc kind of vibes to one of the characters. And Joan of Arc is one of the most interesting historical figures to me, so I was so intrigued by the series. But I was so bored. I was so bored through 3/4 of this book. I wanted to care. I really wanted to care. I cared enough to go to the end. I wanted to know what the end was, but after it finished, I was kind of like, whew, thank God. Okay, yeah, I made it through that, which is a shame. It's really a shame. I wanted to love this, and I know a lot of people who do. This is another one that has a lot of fans, so I think I'm in the minority here, but I'm just not going to be continuing with it, unfortunately. Next is War for the Rose Throne, which I believe the first one is Priest of Bones, I think is the one that I read. Priest of Bones, I think. I'll put it up on the screen with the correct title for the first book is. I read this as a buddy read, actually, a long time ago with Steve from Steve Talks Books over on his channel, and I liked it. I had a good time with it. It's very fast-paced, which is fun, and a nice change of pace for me from what I usually read. Very fast-paced. It's like gang wars in a medieval setting, which is very interesting, but it just didn't grip me enough to continue on. But I do think that if you want something really fast-paced and kind of unique in its world building, and even though it's like a medieval setting. I think this could be up your alley, but it was mid, so it was not enough for me to continue. This next one, The Cat and Mouse duology, I think. The first one is The Haunting of Adeline. This is the only book talk book I've ever read, and I don't really get it. Dark romance is something that I've dabbled into here and there, and I feel like if you're gonna write a dark romance book, just go in. Put your whole foot in it. Go in with your whole chest. You know, don't be kind of half-assing it, which is kind of what this book did, where the main character, it's a stalker romance, okay? So already, all right then, you know, we're going that, all right, you know what you're in for, right? But the main guy character that's the stalker, he's obviously a terrible guy. But then the author couldn't seem to go through with that fully, so he's like this awful stalker guy that is SAing the person that he's obsessed with. And then on the other hand, he's this like secretive mega hacker that uses his skills to take down child trafficking rings. And he only kills the bad guys. And it's like, don't try to make me like this character. Don't try to make up for how terrible he is. Like, if you're going to write a dark romance, just write a dark romance and don't half-ass it and try to make me like him. And I was so annoyed because it felt like the author was just obsessed, shoving in my face, you gotta like this guy. And I was like, no, that's not the point of this. The whole point is to be transgressive. Anyway, that part of it annoyed me. And then I also was very annoyed because the first part of this book does like a haunting house thing mixed with the stalker. So you don't know if it's a stalker, if it's a ghost, what's going on. And as someone who's very easily afraid, that got to me. I was like, this book might actually scare me. This is very interesting. That plot, completely forgotten about halfway through the book. Ghost, where, who, what, where, when, how, just completely disappears. And I was annoyed because that was the one thing that really had me into the story. So anyway, only book talk book I've ever read, not impressed, not saying I'll never do it again. Maybe it'd be worth a reading vlog in the future. But this first, nope, not continuing the series. Just not doing it. Next series is the Cruel Gods series, the first one being The 13th Hour. This is another one that has tons of fans, very much in the minority here, but it just didn't work for me. This was the SPIFBO finalist for Before We Go blog for SPIFBO 8, and so this is why, you know, we judge the books in the competition as a group, because it's majority rules, not just one person's opinion. And the majority really adored this book. I felt like I was skimming the surface of this world because there was just so much to it that I think Skies couldn't take the time to delve into any individual point enough for me in the way that I like my world building to happen. I also just couldn't connect to the characters. There's a found family trope, which I adore, but I didn't feel like the way that they interacted with each other, like it didn't give me those warm fuzzy feelings that I want from a found family trope. So it just didn't work for me, but it did really well in the competition, and there's a lot of people that it worked for. And finally, the last one is the Murder and Magic series, the first one being The Conductors. This one was also just kind of a disappointment for me. It wasn't a bad book by any means, but it wasn't what I wanted. I felt like this book kind of suffered from the magic fixing everything. The magic system is based in star signs and constellations, which is a very interesting concept to me, and it definitely got my attention. But unfortunately, even though I've read the whole book, I can't tell you more than that because I don't think that it was well developed or thought out. It got to the point where I didn't feel like there were any stakes to the story, really, because anytime our characters were having an issue or had a problem, a new magic ability would suddenly appear, and of course that can fix the problem. So that just really ruined a lot of the tension in the story for me, and I don't know, I wanted to love it, but I didn't. This video is a lot longer than I expected it to be. I guess I had things to say about these series. I do plan to make a video of the series that I plan to continue in 2024, hopefully soon. But let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of these yourself, if you disagree with me, if you think, the series is amazing. I would say I could be convinced to continue, but it would be pretty hard at this point because I have so many other series that are unfinished that I want to get through. But you can make a case, maybe you'll win me over. Or if you agree with me and you think some of these you're also not interested in continuing. Would love to chat down below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click that bell. I'd love to have you as part of this community, and I appreciate it. But for now, I'm gonna head out. Jenny!